The next tool I want to show you is called Voiceflow, and well, it just does a bit more complex things than chat-based can do for us, meaning we can customize actually how it interacts, what it responds with, what it opens with, etc., instead of leaving everything up to AI, which is super beneficial when you want to capture specific information or ask specific questions that AI may not ask for you. So this tool is called Voiceflow. Now, if you look at Voiceflow's landing page, you can see it's build and scale AI agents. You come down, it gives you this little animation and just shows you how it works in general. So you understand that there's basically a workflow that it takes you along a user journey based on however you set it up. Now, in our case, we're going to be just introducing this as a concept and tool and how to use it and integrate with Bubble, but this is not a Voiceflow tutorial specifically. We're going to be covering the basics, how to integrate with Bubble, and that's pretty much it. You could do an entire course just on Voiceflow itself. It can get super complex and super in the weeds, but we're going to keep it surface level and just introduce to you this tool. So if we get into Voiceflow, we come to the main dashboard. If you were to just sign up and create an account, you would land here. First thing we're going to do is actually make a new assistant. So for the name, we can call it anything. We'll just call it test for now. Modality, we'll just leave as chat. And then our language, we're going to use English. So we'll continue with that. Then we'll just create the assistant. Once you create the assistant, it's going to give you a little bit of a boilerplate here and kind of tell you how it works using AI, as AI is going to be the main feature they're focused on here. So we'll just delete, in our case, all of these and start from scratch. So delete, 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 click on something else, delete, 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 delete. So once you have the blank canvas set up, we're going to go ahead and start making our workflow. The first thing we want to do in these chatbots, and even if you pull up their own chatbot here, you can see that it pops up with an introduction, hello, your name, and then it has these buttons where I can select a different path to go down. So they literally utilize their own software inside of their software. So we'll close that for now. Let's make our own. So we'll just end this chat. Let's start off with saying something to the user if they open our chat. So you have all these options here, AI, response AI, set AI. We're going to cover those. We're going to cover some of these, and then we'll cover an API call that allows us to store and capture data entered by the user. Now, the first thing we'll start off with is a text. So in here, it's going to say text. You'll have your variants, meaning different ways it could say it. So if one user logged in, it could say, hi, how are you doing today? Another user logged in, it could say something like, hope you're doing well, something like that. It's just going to give you different variants. So we could say, hi, what can we help you with? Okay, and then you could generate a certain amount of variants. Say we generate 3 variants. Don't show this again. And then if you like it, you can just go ahead and click enter. And if you don't, you can click this minus sign. So we can go ahead and just add all of these, and we should be good to go there with all of our different variants. Now, the next thing you typically want to do is give them a few options because they may not even know what to ask. In our case, let's use WGMI Labs as an example. Say we have a customer and we're building a lead capture bot in the right-hand corner of our website. Now, what this bot will do is ask them an initial question, give them a few options on what they can select as a service. Say they're looking for a service, we can say, hey, we offer software development, or hey, we offer AI chatbots. Depending on the option they select, then we'll route them through a certain chain of events. Now, either option they pick, we're still going to capture their information, meaning we want to ask what their name is, what their email is, just so we have that data, and then maybe we could send them an email based on what they say. So the next thing we would actually do here is give a few buttons. So if we come, we can select buttons, and these buttons will just give the user options on where to go. So say, I'm looking for software development. Okay, now we want to add another button for another option. I'm looking for AI chatbots. So we have 2 options. They come on, we say, hi, what can we help you with? Then 2 buttons populate. I'm either looking for software development in general, or I'm looking specifically for an AI chatbot. Now, what we want to do here is route them based on their selection or return specific text based on their selection. Say we want to say something like, oh, so you're looking for software development, or, oh, so you're looking for AI chatbots, right? And we want them to say, hey, yes or no, and if not, we'll just ask the question again, say, well, what can we help you with then? But how do we do that? Well, we have to set variables, and in this case, state variables. And we know what those are already based off our bubble course, but let's go ahead and set those up here. So if they're looking for software development, we actually want to add a state or variable. So we can set a variable, and here we'll just select variable. Then you can apply it to an already existing variable, the value, or we can make a new variable. Let's make a new variable. Say we call this service. So what service they select, that's going to be the variable name, service. So we'll create that variable, and now we can assign a value to that variable. So it'll be ever changing, right? If we say, so you're looking for X or service, we can put a value there so it's specific to the user's selection. All right, so what is the value we're looking for? Well, we're actually I'm looking for a software developer, so we'll use software development as the variable. Now, when you're assigning a variable, make sure it is a string. So make sure you have those quotes, and we'll just type in, you're looking for software development. So in our text, we could say, hey, we're looking for software development, or hey, are you looking for software development? Let's actually spell this correctly though, software development. And then you can go ahead back to your button and let's add a variable for chatbots. So it'll be the same thing, come down to actions, click the plus, and we'll set another variable. Now we should already have our service variable down here, so we can go ahead and use that. And in this case, we'll set it to AI chatbots and make sure you end it with a quote. Great, so now we're setting the variable based on the button they select. Now we need to route to the next step. So in our case, the next step will be confirming what they selected. So you can just drag this up over here, make a new box. And in this case, we're going to be having a text field. So in this case, you see it says enter text reply or add variables, and that's what we're going to do. So great. You are looking for software development. And in this case, you just put the service. So you'll open your curly bracket, and then we'll find our service variable. Go ahead and click enter, and then you have that all set up. We have that connected. Now we just need to make sure we drag both these over here. So no matter what option they pick, then they will be directed to the same spot, and the variable will just change based on what they selected. Let's come and run what we have so far. So if we start from the beginning, it says something that initiates the conversation, right? Hey there, how can we help you? If I select I'm looking for software development, you can now, it goes to the next step and says, great, you were looking for software development. So we actually prompted exactly what we want to say back instead of leaving it up to AI, right? If we were to select AI chatbots, say, great, you were looking for AI chatbots. So it's working so far, which is great. Let's go ahead and close out of this and go to the next step. Now, in this case, the next step is just going to be collecting info. We want to collect their information as fast as we can when it comes to lead gen. Now, this isn't a lead gen course, but nonetheless, there's a few pointers. All right, so the first thing we're going to collect is our first name. So let's enter that. Say, okay, great. Let's start by collecting some info. And then we can go to the next field and add another text box and say, what is your first name? Let's say we're just going to collect first name and email. So we'll say first name, and then we want to set a variable here because we need to store what they put in for their first name. So important that you learn how to set variables. You're going to be doing it a lot if you work with Voiceflow, so it's important to understand the concept. But how do we capture their first name? Because they entered it. In the previous step, we had a button that we already knew the information. They could literally enter anything here, and we have to figure out how to store that. So how do we do that? Well, let's make the new box. And here we're actually going to go down to where it says listen, and then we have capture. So we're going to capture something. We're waiting for something or the user to type something in and waiting for that to happen. And it stores it in a variable called last utterance. So let's set that variable. How do we do that? We'll come to action again. We'll set a variable. And in this case, let's create a new variable and call it first name. Great. We'll create the variable. Now, the expression or value we're going to have here is that last utterance. So we can actually take last utterance and apply it to first name in this case. Now that we have that name stored, let's actually say it back to them and confirm that. We could talk, and we'll go to text, and we'll say, hi, then we can enter a variable here that's first name. So it says, hi, first name, and then we can go on to the next step. So that'll confirm the first name. The next thing we want to capture is email. So we'll have another text under saying, hi, first name, and we'll say, what is a good email to reach you at? We have that, and then we're just going to repeat the step we just did. So we're going to capture that last utterance and assign the email they input to an email variable. Let's do that. We're going to be listening for something, and we're going to capture it. It's going to be their last utterance, and in this case, we're going to set the variable and create a new variable called email. Create the variable, and for the value, we're going to be storing that last utterance. So let's get that, and you're good to go. So we should be capturing the email and the name. Let's just go ahead and confirm their email. We'll add another text. Now here, we want to say the email back to them and have them confirm it. So what we can do is say, your email is email as the variable, comma, correct. So we want them to confirm that. And if not, we want to loop them back to where they just were asked for their email. So if we drag this over, it'll make it a little bit more clear. Right now, they're routed here and it ends, and we're going to give them two options here. So let's select our buttons, drag a button over, and we'll either say yes or no. Now, based on what button they click, we're going to route them to two different places. If they say no, we're going to go back to what is a good email to reach you at. So just we'll select no, and we'll go back to what is a good email to reach you at. If they select yes, we're going to continue on our path. So we'll just say something like, great. What can we help you with? Okay, so let's go back to the beginning and start and go through the entire flow together. Let's start here. We'll come up here to the top right and run. We'll run a test. Let's go through it and see what happens. So I'm looking for software development. Great, you're looking for software development. Let's start by collecting some info. What is your first name? We'll say Tucker. Okay, it seems like it stores our name. Hi, Tucker. What is a good email to reach you at? We'll say test@gmail.com. We're going to give it that. And then let's say no. So say we don't want that as our email. We'll say no. It'll say, what is a good email to reach you at? Again, we'll just give it the same thing. But this time, we'll say yes. And then it routes to, great, what can we help you with? So super cool how you can route the user to where you like specifically instead of leaving it up to AI and mystery, and you don't really know where they're going to get directed. Here, we can specifically say where that is going to occur. But we're not done with the flow here yet. First, I want to do two things. I want to capture the data that they gave us and send it somewhere and store it. And I want to add AI at the end where we train a knowledge base on our services. So let's come over to the sidebar, and you will see an icon right here that says content. Go ahead and click that, and then you'll see our agent and knowledge. This is where you're going to add a data source to train that custom knowledge base that your AI can then reference. So we'll add a data source. In our case, we're going to be doing a URL, which is the WGMI Labs URL. So we'll say WGMILabs.com, and then we'll import. So once it's trained on that, then we can go back to our voice flow and have the user ask questions about our website. Great, so it looks like it trained successfully. Once you see the status and the green check, you know you're good to go. Of course, if you have some different type of data here, you can add just plain text, upload files, URLs, etc., etc. Whatever data you have, you upload it here. Now, let's go back and actually utilize it. So it says, great, what can we help you with? Then, of course, they're going to be asking a question, and we need to capture that. So we'll have our capture event here, come to logic or listen, and we'll have capture. We'll have that last utterance, and then we're going to use our AI. So this allows them to enter text and us capture it. Then we're going to come over here to response AI, and this is where the prompt is going to be input. So let's just use the last utterance in this case. It already has a variable for us. Why not use it? Last utterance. The data source we're going to use is knowledge base because we trained it on that. Here, you can give it instructions. Now, when a user asks a question, that'll act as our prompt, then it references our knowledge base. Now, one other thing is I like to turn off not found path, meaning it won't give some null answer. It'll just make an answer up if it can't find something. So that is how we are setting up the prompt, capturing that piece of information from the user, and then referencing our knowledge base. Then you could put this on a loop that just allows them to keep asking questions and questions if you wanted to. We're just going to end it here with one question. And let's run through how this works now. So we'll start from the very beginning and we'll run it. We'll run the test. Let's go through it one more time. Looking for software development. Great. Let's get some info. Okay, Tucker. And then we'll say test@gmail.com. Enter. Okay, your email is test@gmail.com. Correct. Yes. Then we go on to the next step. Great. What can we help you with? And this is where we're able to reference our knowledge base. So let's say, what services do you offer? We hit enter. Then it should use that as the prompt and generate us some type of response related to WGMI Labs. And it does just that. So you can kind of see the use cases now that you could use Voiceflow for. Instead of chat-based, where you're pretty much limited to how AI interacts, and you can't really capture any of the data that gets input. Now, speaking of capturing data, how are we going to do that? Because we have their name and email, but we need to store it somewhere. Well, in Voiceflow, I like to use Zapier. Now, let's set that up. Over here in our tools, you have something called API, which you're now very familiar with. We can actually drag that on and send information to a webhook where something is listening. In this case, Zapier is listening for some information or event to be triggered. Let's drag this on the screen. So we have this new block up here, and it is going to be sending our information to Zapier. Now, what needs to happen here is instead of when they select yes for the email, they go great to what can we help you with, let's route them through this webhook. So if they click yes, we'll then store that data. And then once that's successful, we just move on to the next question, which is great. What can we help you with? Now in here, it's looking for a webhook URL. Let's head over to Zapier and create a zap and set up that webhook. So in Zapier, you have a trigger and an action. Now, when you select trigger, it's going to give you options here. And what we're looking for is webhooks by Zapier. And it's going to give us this URL that we're then going to copy and paste over into Voiceflow. So when we choose an event, we're looking for catch a hook. And that's going to be the event listener. We'll click continue. We'll click continue. Now it's listening. It gives us this webhook URL. So we'll copy that. Let's go ahead over to Voiceflow again. And we'll input it in our URL here. Great. So that is the URL we need. Now we need to send parameters to that webhook. Now, what are we sending? Well, we're going to be sending the first name and that email that we're capturing. So we'll just type in first name underscore name. And let's say that value is equal to, well, the variable that we defined it in. Great. So now that we have that, let's add the email. We'll just say email. And then we'll get the email variable. Great. Now let's run through this again and see if it can't capture our data. So we'll come up here to the right, run our test, and we will go through this one more time. So I'm looking for software development. Great, you're looking for that. Yes, thank you. Tucker is my name. We'll go test@gmail.com. Great. Looks like it was successful. If I click yes, API call successfully triggered. Great. What can we help you with? And then we can ask a question for our knowledge base. Let's go to Zapier. Now we can test the trigger. And you can see we now have my first name over here and my email. Now you could do a whole myriad of things with this information. We could be sending an email. We could be sending this information to a database to make. Wherever we want to send this information, that is where you would do your action. So in this instance, we could do a Gmail. You could choose an event. You could send the email, continue, choose the account. Then you have access to whatever variables you catch in Voiceflow. So very important. If you wanted to capture other information, address, city they live in, whatever you want to capture, do that in Voiceflow, send it to Zapier, and then send it off wherever you want to use it or do a specific action with that data. But it's super cool that we can just capture any data over there from our chatbot and now send it over to Zapier to be able to do something with it. Now, how do we put this in Bubble? That is the next big question. So in this case, you can just do exactly what we did with Chatbase, which is put that little widget in the bottom right corner. If we come to integration down here, one of the last icons, you'll see web chat. And you can see this is what it is going to look like. Of course, just like Chatbase, you can customize this to however you want to fit your certain appearance based on your logo, your website, your theme, etc. That is all right here. Now, it's still going to stay in this chat box though, but let's show you how to do that. So you have this script tagged, and we do exactly what we did with our Chatbase example. Let's make a new page, call it Voiceflow. We'll create, and all we want to do is grab that same HTML element, drag it on our screen, then you input that script tag. Great. Once you do that, you can come over to preview, and you can see it pop up down here in the bottom right of your screen. If you open it, start a chat though, you see nothing happens. So why didn't anything happen, or why didn't it prompt us with the initial prompt we gave it? Well, let's come back to Voiceflow, come back to our designer, and to actually make this work, you need to publish it. So we'll just give it a test name. You come up to the top right and click publish, and we publish it, and now it should go live. So every time you make even the most minor adjustment, you need to publish so it reflects on your live application. If we come back to Bubble now, refresh our preview, let's open it up, start a new chat. You can see now, actually type something, and you can see that it gives the buttons for our selection, and we could run through the entire workflow here, and it works, well, just the same as our builder. But let's go back and see how we can further integrate this to make it a little bit more customizable. Okay, so let's get rid of that HTML script tag and say we want to make it more customizable. Now, this can get pretty advanced and in-depth, but they do make it possible to do. For this, I want to do a more basic example than this giant workflow though. We can keep the workflow, but let's just get rid of this first start line and make something much more simple. So for this integration example, let's just drag a new path down, and we'll simply listen for a user to type something in, meaning a question or prompt, and we'll just have it reference our knowledge base. So we'll capture that last utterance, and we'll go right to our response AI and put that last utterance right there using our knowledge base, of course. Okay, great. Make sure we uncheck not found path, and of course, publish it. So we'll come up, publish it, say test 2, and once you're good to go there, let's have a look at our integrations again. You can see we have our option for API keys. Now, what do we do with that? Well, it doesn't really tell us anything here, but up here you can see expand your capabilities, connect to all your agent data with our suite of APIs, meaning there's going to be some API docs we'd like to see, and here they are. Now, we should be familiar with API docs at this point, and you should be able to go to overview and read through this on your own and be able to figure it out. Nonetheless, we're going to do it together, so don't worry. We're going to come down to API reference. In our case, we'll skip over overview, but essentially it's going to tell you how to set up our user ID capture and our version ID for development and production. Now, in our case, we're just going to be using the user ID from Bubble. But the reason you need a user ID, so you can have multiple conversations going on at once. Now let's get right into setting this up. We'll come to our interact, and this is where you're going to launch that initiation. So in Voiceflow's case, you can't just start the conversation right away like OpenAI. You actually have to initiate or launch what they call the action. On your right side of the screen here, you see the trusty old curl command. And that's what we're going to be using to integrate with Bubble. Let's copy and paste that right away. So we have our curl command. We'll come back over to Bubble. Let's go to our plugins, and let's make a new plugin or connection. Collapse our OpenAI one. We're going to add another API, and we'll call it Voiceflow. Great. Now, inside of this, let's expand this, get rid of the initial one they provide for us, and import another call from curl. We'll paste that in. You can see, of course, it generates everything for us, just how we like it, but we need to change a few things. First, let's call this launch. Not lunch, launch. And then we'll use as action instead of data. You can see here that in the URL it provides, it has a hard-coded user ID. Now, in our case, we need to provide a unique value. It doesn't have to be something specific, but Voiceflow provides certain parameters you need to follow, such as it can be a number or letter. In our case, we're just going to use Bubble's unique ID. How do we do that? Well, when you're using parameters, you can see over here off to the right, it says use brackets for parameters, meaning we can make it dynamic based on the user ID. Get rid of user ID, give a bracket, and then simply type in user underscore ID. Now close that off with another bracket, and you can see we now have a key value pair here that we can input a value to. We're going to uncheck it and make it not private, but for initializing the call, just go ahead and put 1, 2, 3. This will be dynamic, of course, which we will address in the workflow. Now, what else do we need here? We have accept and content type, and those are application JSON, but we need our authorization. So we need to add a new header, and we need to figure out what this key is going to be called, because everything is different. Remember, depending on the documentation, could be named something else. Let's go back to the docs. See up here that the header is actually going to be titled authorization. So we can just say authorization and then our key. Authorization, capitalized A. Then our API key goes here. Let's go and get our API key. We'll just copy and paste this. So copy API key, come back, insert it right in our value. This will be private. We can also just check these as private as well. Then we should be able to launch this action. Let's initialize the call and see what happens. So it looks like it initialized successfully, and that's great. Let's click save and go on to the next step. Remember, that just initializes the action or launches your workflow. We need a way for the user to actually send their prompt or their question. Now, we need 2 endpoints to do this. So let's collapse our launch, and we're going to be importing another. We spelled it lunch again. Let's go ahead and expand, and we will call that launch. Collapse that. Let's go back to the docs and see what we need to do here. Okay, so this is actually going to be the same input. However, we're going to be just providing it a few more parameters. In our case, let's scroll down, and you can see that we have our action, and we have text request. So this is where we're going to allow that user to send some sort of text. So for example, we could say, what services do you offer? And you can see here that it live updates the curl command, which is awesome. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to copy and paste this new curl. So we'll import another call from curl, paste that in, import. Now you can see it's what services do you offer instead of the launch one where it is just saying launch as an action. So we'll collapse that. Let's fix that right away. This, of course, is going to be dynamic. How do we do that in Bubble? Well, we already know how to do that. So we'll just type in user input. User underscore input. Great. And that's going to be our dynamic variable that will act as the text. Okay, so it should pop up down here. We now have our value. In our case, we'll uncheck private, but we'll give it a value just to initialize the call. So we'll say, what services do you offer? And apparently Bubble doesn't want to work today, and it is not saying what I type in. So we'll give it a second to catch up with me. And there it goes. It populates my question. What services do you offer? Of course, we need to add our authorization header again. So authorization. For some reason, Bubble does this every once in a while. I don't know why, but it just is delayed. Maybe I need to refresh. Nonetheless, let's move on. I'll get the API key here in Voiceflow again. Just copy API key. We'll paste it right over here. Let's go ahead and make these private again and use as action. Change the user ID, of course, and we'll give it those brackets. We'll say user underscore ID. Then close off the brackets. Should get that key value pair to populate now. Uncheck the private and just give it that 1, 2, 3. Great. Let's name it chat, and we should be good to go. Let's go initialize this and see what happens. So we initialize our call, and it's going to return a bunch of things here. So we have actually our document that it referenced, meaning our knowledge base, which is super cool that it's able to do that. It says the role of the AI, gives us a bunch of information. You can see here the payload slate content has a child, and there has a text, which is our response. You can see it there. It says WGMI Lat. I can barely see it. Offers software development services and enhances business operations. Of course, you can see the entire JSON object right here, which is awesome. So great. We have that all set up. We can click save, and we should be good to go here. We can collapse that. And now all that's left is to set up our workflow. We've come over to our workflow, and we need our design, of course. So let's have some way to submit it and display it. We'll have an input where the user can ask a question. Let's select our input field, drag it on your screen. Then we'll have a button where they can submit. And then we'll just have the output, so a text box. big text box like so. Great. And it just disappeared. I have no idea where that went. Let's do that again. Drag it on the screen. Great. Now we have our text box. Now the first thing in our text box, of course, is we want to set up our variable where we're going to assign the AI response. So we know how to do that. We'll come up, we'll set a new custom state. We'll call it AI response. And again, Bubble is being super slow for some reason, but nonetheless, state type is going to be text, and we'll go ahead and create. Now, we'll leave the default variable, in this case, blank, and we'll just make sure that we're displaying the new state variable here. So in this case, it'll come from text, and we should see our new custom state as AI response. We should be displaying the response now here. Okay, great. We have the input. Now let's add our submit right here, and let's get straight into the workflow. So we'll come and add a new workflow. We need to think about here what needs to happen, because we have launch and then chat. So within one workflow, we need to launch it and then provide the chat endpoint, the user's response or input, in order to get back our response and then set that state variable. So that's going to be our workflow. Let's go ahead and do that. First thing we'll come and do is come to our plugin. We'll go to Voiceflow Launch. You can see here that we have our JSON object here. We can just leave that blank. The only thing we're going to be changing is the user ID. This is going to be dynamic, and we're just going to get Bubble's user ID from the current user. You'll select current user, and you'll simply select unique ID. And that's what we're going to use to track each conversation. So that's really all there is to setting up the launch. Let's move into chat, which is also very easy. We'll have Voiceflow chat. We'll have, of course, the current user's unique ID for the dynamic data, current user ID, or current user unique ID. And then we'll move on to the input, which, of course, will be dynamic as well. Let's get our input A's value and send it as our input. Now, the last thing is going to be assigning the state variable. Now, you might need to play around with how to get the specific data you're going to use in order to store as a state variable. Let me show you what I mean by this. So if we come and we set a state, we're going to, of course, find our text A. Our custom state is AI response. The value is going to be the result of step 2. Then we'll scroll down to where it says our list of messages, our payload message, and then we'll scroll down again, and then let's select first item. Okay, so we have first item, but let's go make sure this is actually going to work and look at our debugger to see where we actually get the data. So let's go to our database, and we're going to run as a specific user. Come in app data, all users. We'll just run as this test user and see what happens. So let's say, what services do you offer? Now, if we run step by step and we click submit, let's go through this together. So you can see this is our user ID that gets assigned. We run next. This is our input that we're seeing. We run next. Now you see this value is empty, but let's look at why. We come to result of step 2. We see the response right here, but we just weren't getting it from the correct place. So it actually looks like it comes from payload query output. So we need to go correct that. Let's go back to our workflow, and we're looking for payload query output. So we did not do that right. So let's come back and get the correct item. We're looking for payload query output. Then you can just go ahead and select the first item it gives. Let's try that again. Run as test. We'll say, what services do you offer? We'll submit. We'll run through the workflow again. And now you see the value is actually being displayed here. And then we can run next. You see it actually does populate. So that is how you use Voiceflow and make it a lot more customizable than you can chat-based. Now, with Voiceflow, I recommend using this when you need to guide the user specifically down a certain path and you need to be in majority control. But this isn't the best AI tool per se to use. And in the next lesson, I'm going to show you what I think is the most robust and in-depth AI tool there is out there that is already pre-built for you. So you just upload and train knowledge, and it has a bunch of different functionality and features specifically related to AI. So if you're just trying to get the best AI model out there, in the next lesson, we're going to be using the tool just for that. However, if you're looking to guide the user and take more direction and control over it while still having a little bit of AI capability, then Voiceflow is the answer for you. But with that, I want to see you in the next lesson because this is my favorite one by far.